Right now, somewhere in your wallet, your pocket, maybe just lying on your kitchen counter, there's a piece of paper, just paper, ink, cotton fiber, a few tiny threads woven in, and yet that little piece of paper can buy you food, pay your rent, start a business, or end one. But here's the thing nobody ever stops to think about. Why? Why does a piece of paper have that kind of power? Who decided that? When did that happen? And what did people do before paper money even existed? Because here's the truth. For most of human history, paper money didn't exist at all, and the story of how it came to be, it's not clean, it's not simple, it is messy, desperate, brilliant, and sometimes terrifying. This is the real story of the paper note, and by the end of this, I promise, you will never look at a dollar bill the same way again. Think about the world before banks, before paper, before coins even. Thousands of years ago, people still needed things they didn't have. A farmer needed cloth, a hunter needed grain, a mother needed medicine for her child. So what did they do? They traded directly, face to face. You give me 10 fish, I give you a bag of wheat. Deal, simple, right? Except it wasn't simple at all. What if you had fish, but the wheat farmer didn't want fish that day? What if you needed 3 things, but only had 1 thing to offer? What if you traveled far from home and nobody knew the value of what you were carrying? Trade, real trade, was exhausting and complicated, and the deeper human civilization grew, the more obvious it became. There had to be a better system. The first money wasn't money at all, not the way we think of it. In ancient Mesopotamia, roughly modern-day Iraq, people used grain, stored in temples, measured carefully, given as payment. Workers built palaces, farmers grew crops, and in return, they received grain rations measured in a unit called the shekel. Not a coin, not a note, grain. Actual food. Cattle came next. In many early African and European cultures, how many cows you owned was how rich you were. Cows were currency. Living, breathing, mooing currency. And then there were shells. Cowrie shells. Small, smooth, beautiful, easy to carry. For over 4,000 years in parts of Africa, Asia, and even the Americas, these tiny shells were money. Real money. People traded them, saved them, counted them like we count dollars. But none of this solved the core problem. Grain rots, cattle die. Shells are hard to standardize. Humanity needed something more reliable. And then, around 700 BCE, something changed. The ancient kingdom of Lydia, in what is now Western Turkey, struck the world's first metal coins. Electrum coins, a natural mix of gold and silver, stamped with the image of a lion. For the first time in history, a government had created a standardized, portable, durable form of money. The ancient world went wild for it. Greece adopted coins, Persia adopted coins, Rome built an empire, in many ways, on coins. Metal money dominated for over 1,000 years, but metal had its own problems. And the solution to those problems? That's where things get really interesting. By the time of the Tang Dynasty, around 600 to 900 CE, China was one of the most advanced civilizations on Earth. They had silk, spices, porcelain, a thriving trade network stretching thousands of miles. But there was a problem. Copper coins were heavy. If you were a merchant traveling the Silk Road, carrying enough coins to conduct real business meant hauling around pounds, sometimes hundreds of pounds, of metal. Imagine traveling thousands of miles through deserts and mountains with bags of coins. Robbers loved you. Your back hated you. So Chinese merchants came up with a workaround. They started leaving their coins with trusted merchants in the capital city. And in return, they got a piece of paper, a receipt, a written promise that said, this person has X amount of coins waiting for for them. They called it Fei Xian, flying money, because money could now fly across distances without physically moving. And here's where it gets fascinating. At first, this was entirely unofficial, just merchants helping merchants, private agreements on paper. But then the government noticed. During the Song dynasty around 960 CE, the Chinese government looked at this system and did what governments tend to do. They took it over. They created the world's first government-issued paper money called jiaozi. It had official seals, expiration dates, anti-counterfeiting designs. It was real, backed by the state, and it worked for a while. Now here's the part of the story that most history classes skip completely. Paper money almost destroyed China when the government realized they could print money, actual paper. Instead of digging up metal, they got a little carried away. Wars are expensive. Floods need relief. Palaces don't build themselves. So what did they do? They printed more and more and more. And the more paper they printed without backing it with real value, gold, silver, resources, the less each note was worth. Prices went up, trust collapsed. Merchants refused to accept the paper. By the time of the Yuan dynasty, Kublai Khan's empire, the paper money system was in chaos. Inflation had consumed entire regions. People who had saved their whole lives suddenly found their savings were worthless. Marco Polo visited China in the 1200s and wrote home about this bizarre system where the emperor made people accept paper as money. Europeans laughed. They thought it was absurd. Paper as money? That's insane. And honestly, they weren't entirely wrong to be skeptical, because the same disaster was going to repeat itself over and over across different continents, different centuries. The lesson of paper money's early history is dark. Every single time a government printed paper without discipline, the economy burned. Europe came to paper money late and reluctantly. For centuries, Europeans clung to gold and silver coins. The Catholic Church had rules against lending money for interest. Banking was practically sinful. But then, the Renaissance changed everything. Cities like Florence in Italy became centers of massive wealth. Traders doing business across the continent needed a better system than hauling gold across the Alps. And so the Medici family, possibly the most powerful bankers in history, helped pioneer something called the Bill of Exchange. A letter, a piece of paper that said, essentially, I owe you. Signed, verified, trusted. Not money exactly, but a promise of money. And once people trusted the promise, the paper became the money. Fast forward to 1661, Stockholm, Sweden. A bank called Stockholms Banco, overwhelmed by too many heavy copper coins being deposited, did something no European institution had ever done before. They issued the continent's first official banknotes, printed paper, representing a deposit of real money held in the vault. You walk in, you deposit your gold, you walk out with a piece of paper. You can spend that paper anywhere the bank is trusted. Brilliant, right? Except the bank printed more notes than it had gold. And when people found out, the bank collapsed. The founder was arrested. Sound familiar? When the American colonies were fighting for independence, they had a money problem. No central bank, no gold reserves, and a war to fund. So the Continental Congress did what desperate governments always do. They printed money. Continental currency, they called it. At first it worked. Soldiers got paid, supplies got bought, but then they printed more, and more, and more. By the end of the Revolutionary War, continental currency was so worthless that the phrase "not worth a continental" became a popular insult. Something worthless, completely without value. America had learned the hard way. It took decades of financial chaos, competing state currencies, and economic crises before the United States finally built a real, stable monetary system. The Federal Reserve wasn't created until 1913. Before that, America's money system was a patchwork of private banknotes, state currencies, and gold certificates. A financial Wild West. And for most of American history, paper money was backed by gold, the gold standard. You could theoretically walk into a bank and trade your dollar bill for actual gold. But then, President Nixon stood in front of the nation and announced that the United States would no longer convert dollars to gold. Just like that, the dollar became fiat currency. Money backed not by gold, not by silver, but by trust, by belief, by the collective agreement of 300 million Americans and eventually the world that these pieces of paper mean something. Here's the thing that should genuinely stop you in your tracks. That dollar bill in your pocket. It's not backed by anything physical. There's no gold bar in Fort Knox with your name on it. There's no vault somewhere holding the real version of your money. The dollar has value because we decided it does. That's it. That's the whole system. And honestly, that's both terrifying and kind of beautiful because it means that paper money is, at its core, one of the greatest acts of collective human imagination ever created. We, all of us, agreed on a shared story that these pieces of printed cotton paper have value, that we will honor them, that we will work for them and build for them and sometimes die for them. Every civilization that ever tried to cheat that agreement, print too much, lie about the backing, manipulate the supply, paid a devastating price. And every civilization that maintained it built roads, hospitals, schools, and futures. Paper money isn't just an economic tool, it's a test of human trust. And right now, today, in the digital age, that test is evolving again. Cryptocurrency, digital wallets, central bank digital currencies. The next chapter in this story is already being written. From cowrie shells on an African beach, to grain stored in Mesopotamian temples, to coins stamped with lions in ancient Turkey, to flying money in Tang Dynasty China, to the first crumbling paper notes in Sweden, to the dollar bill in your wallet right now. This story, this long, messy, brilliant, sometimes catastrophic story, is really about one thing: people trying to trust each other, trying to build a world where a stranger in a different city can hand you a piece of paper and you'll believe it means something. That's what money is, not gold. Not paper, not numbers on a screen, trust. And the next time you hold a dollar bill, really hold it. Maybe think about the thousands of years it took to get there. The merchants who carried coins across mountains. The Chinese officials who printed the world's first banknote and watched it collapse. The Revolutionary War soldiers paid in currency that became worthless. The decision made in 1971 that still shapes your life today. All of it compressed into that one small, humble, extraordinary piece of paper.